Want to talk about today is just some return on investment tracking systems for success for your directories that can help you be more efficient with your advertising money once you get to that point, and some systems on how to do that using UTMs, and we'll get to what that is when you say, for those of you who don't know what that is, I'll explain that. And then just kind of talk some marketing short links and some potential ways that you guys can use that for your directory. So just in kicking off this topic, just a little background history. Before 2005, when you were calculating return on investment for your marketing campaigns, it was all guesswork and approximations, right? The internet was fairly new. Nobody really knew. They were paying money for ads, didn't know where the money was going. And then Google released their big money maker, which I think everybody knows now, which was not so common then, but is common to everybody now, is Google AdWords. And they basically, forever changed that marketing and advertising as we know it on the internet. And it's kind of the staple advertising ones. Obviously, there's other niche directories, and Scott could probably talk about that, the stuff that he does. But, AdWords is the big ticket in town, or the kahuna on that. And then when they released that, they actually, they released their conversion tracking ability for those AdWords. And so marketers and business owners could basically pay for those online advertisements and know the exact cost of each ad click, and then know whether or not that particular ad click resulted in a sale. And so when that happened, when they introduced AdWords and that conversion tracking ability, it was revolutionary, right, at that time, because you were able to track the dollar you spend to the dollar you make and make wise business decisions. And so I'm not talking about AdWords today as the revolutionary topic of concern for today. What I'm talking about is the general concept of digital attribution. How you're spending your money, your ad, or your time and effort in developing and advertising or promoting your directory, and how that results and attributes to any money that you make. And so I think anybody can admit that that is something that they would want to do or should do. And so the question is how. So AdWords basically gave us an accurate baseline to experiment from. If you spent X and made Y, then you could expand that from a baseline and scale your advertising, right? So if you're losing money, you never want to do that advertising again. But if you were making a little bit of money, even a little bit scaled up becomes a lot of money. And so depending on how your setup was, you could make wise business decisions. And so that introduced the ability to track that ROI accurately. And so the question is, why don't we do the same thing for online marketing activities that you do for your directory? I mean, what about blogging, display ads, webinars, email marketing? All these things are digital. Is that possible to do that same thing, that ROI assessment and decision-making, do it for everything else that you do for your directory and promoting it? And the answer is yes. And so today I'm going to show you how to discover, what you need to know to track most of your online marketing activities, and basically, hopefully rule your niche that you're in by using those different metrics. And then I'm also going to look at how you can apply that approach to, a variety of marketing channels, and then how you can use those different tools to derive insights from your data. I'm not going to go into the data and number crunching, and we're going to just be going over how this works. But, once you're done doing that, and if you execute, and you use that data that this provides, you'll be able to calculate that ROI for your online marketing campaigns with precision, so that you can double down on your wins and quickly cut your losses. And I think that's what everybody wants to do in terms of these the money opportunities on the internet. Oops. So what I want to talk about is UTMs today, and everybody's saying, what is a UTM? And basically, UTM are basically parameters, is an established system that allows you to track your marketing campaigns uniformly across most analytics tools. And UTMs are basically the way you know that the true return on investment of your online marketing activities. So if you do some sort of business online, you kind of have no choice to use them. You don't have to use them, but if you don't, a lot of times you're not going to actually know what you're spending your money on, whether that's wasted or was profitable for you. So UTMs are the way to universally track it. And what it basically is I would just compare it to any government standard where you have exact dimensions of something, like all the threads, right, on certain bolts are all the same, width or whatever. So when you get a bolt and a nut, they all fit, right? Or standards of sizes of tires, right? Your rim tire, they're all the same. So if you buy a tire into a certain rim size, it's going to fit. Those are probably some better examples of standards, but everybody gets the point that if once you have standardization and all these systems and tools use that, you can gain some insights. You're not have a funneled process that only works on one particular system and doesn't work on the other one. The UTMs are basically that standard across the board. And Frank asked me that a little bit ago. He's like, "What is UTM?" It's actually that actually stands for. Let me get this right so I don't mess this up on that. It's actually Urchin Tracking Module is what that stands for. It kind of doesn't really matter now. Urchin is one of those big analytics companies of the past that got eaten up by Google. But because Google bought them out when they started releasing their Google Analytics, this is the system that they used to start tracking all these different parameters. And because it became the standard and you can add it to any other URLs for other systems, it just became the standard. And then all the systems are starting to use that. But the only way that you can use them is if you actually have those turned on or use those in your links. And so that's what we're going to kind of talk about, the different components of those today and then how you can use them. So what I want to talk about, or why use UTMs, is because it allows you to focus what matters instead of doing vanity metrics. And you can kind of see a vanity metrics in the background cartoon here. And vanity metrics are basically those things you can measure but don't really matter. For example, like email opens. I've had this many email opens, or I've had this many Facebook likes. It looks good on paper, right? But they're data points that appear positive, but can either be easily changed or manipulated, or they don't have an actual direct correlation with numbers that speak to business success, right? Just because you have a lot of email opens or Facebook likes does not mean that you actually sold anything or made any money. And so they really don't matter. They're just vanity metrics. And so there's a lot of marketers in charge of email marketing campaigns, say like, hey, I got a 22% open rate, or I got a 48% click-through rate, and I did pretty good on that. But the reality is, unless they clicked on the email and purchased something, it doesn't really matter. And so if you can't connect those email clicks back to actual purchases, then you should be concerned about that, because it's just a vanity metric. It doesn't mean anything to you. You can't do any actionable item or information off from that. And so what you want to do is you want to make sure you're using the UTMs in order to measure actual important business metrics, so you actually know your return on the investment for your actual thing. I'm going to turn off everybody's mics here just so I don't get any background. All right. So hopefully that makes sense for everybody. But basically, the UTM gets you actionable data that you can use to make smart business decisions. So before we get into the UTMs, obviously, when we're talking money, we're just going to go over a little bit of financial stuff. And this is mostly obvious for everybody. I just want to kind of detail it for everybody on why, how you make these decisions. Is that the cost normally for content, when you do for your directory or some other line stuff, is basically broken down into two parts. It's the cost of content creation and then the cost of distribution. So think about it when you're doing content for your directory. The most basic cost of content marketing is creating it. So whether you've outsourced a job or do different things in-house for your directory, your company, there's always a cost attached to it, right? I mean, with outsourcing, it's basically the fees that you pay to a third-party agency. For in-house, time is money. So if you're spending time doing it, you're not doing something else to make money, or you're paying somebody internal to the company, or even yourself, I guess, on paper in order to do it, because time is money. So it's either time lost for you or other activities, or your employees' time you have to pay for. Or obviously billing time that you're going to have to charge to your agency clients, and it's costing them money. So bottom line, time is money, and I think we all know that. So you have to think about how much that time is really costing you, really. I mean, if you're a solopreneur and you're just writing your blog instead of watching TV, then maybe the cost is zero. But really, it's never a cost of zero. There's always a trade-off. So if you need to do that and see how much money or time you're focusing on that human capital that you're doing that, it's going to cost you some efficiency or other money or time. And it's just that simple. So if your billable hours or the amount of money or time that you're wasting on that is greater than what you're actually getting in, you're going to be losing money. And the other part of that is the cost of distribution. And so obviously just producing high quality content. So for example, we talked about making the graphics last week. So just because you have really good graphics, that seldom brings you traffic and customers. You have to distribute that content, right? Put it in the right areas, get somebody to pay to put it somewhere, get it in front of your target audience. And so that distribution of content has costs with it as well. So some of the distribution channels, maybe are social media advertising or pay-per-click ads, whatever it is, you're going to have some sort of cost for that distribution. So those two things, the cost of creation and the cost of distribution, are two of the things that you have to think about for cost. And so on the other end of the spectrum is the return on investment calculation, is how much you're actually getting back in revenue. And so what you see on the screen here is just an equation for that. But the next step towards finding your return on investment is to calculate that revenue. And so once you've posted your content, and you need to find out the number of leads it's generating, and if any, the number of purchases based off from that. Otherwise, it's just a total guess. And so this is a quick math example on here. If you spend $100,000 and you make $300,000, you can calculate with relative ease that you've made $200,000, right? That's the top of the equation. And then if you divide it by the amount you spent, again, that's your percentage. So so in this example, you made $200,000, but you spent $100,000 to do it. You made a 200% return on investment. And so knowing that ROI is good, but the real problem with that is it's not easy to tell what got you that 2%, especially if you're doing it in a bunch of different multi-channels like you would normally see in today's online marketing world. And so internet marketing, which I think everybody knows here, is not that cut and dry, right? Content marketing is much more complicated. It can make it difficult and to clear and not very clear to establish that relationship between your sales and content. Because when you're looking at this graph here, you're doing internet marketing, which one of these bubbles gave you that $300,000 amount? Which one of these bubbles was the largest part of the $100,000 that you spent? It's not that easy. And so you can't just bundle everything into one neat figure. With the online marketing we have now, we have to be able to prove a return on investment for each one of those individual channels. I mean, if you're spending $100 across 3 different marketing channels and you're generating $200, it doesn't mean that all marketing channels are giving you a positive ROI. Maybe the SEO is the only one that's positive. Everything else is negative and dragging you down. You shouldn't even do those. Maybe you just focus on the SEO part of the internet marketing. So it could be just that one of them is dramatically over delivering while the rest of them are losing you money. And that's the point. You want to know which one of those are, but unless you have a way of figuring out which ones are paying off the UTMs, using those, there's no way to tell where your marketing spend or where your income is coming from. And so that is where it comes into play. One of the things, if you look at it, here's another way to look at it for internet marketing. Instead of the bubbles of activities, here's the different things that we always do all the time, or we spend time making, or we spend money paying for, whether it be educating by making infographics or guides, whether we're doing entertainment by making a video. If we're paying somebody, an endorsement, or somebody that has some followers to post something for us, or whether we're trying to convince them through checklists or case studies or just online demos. All of these are activities or marketing efforts that we're pushing to other people, is taking time and money to execute. What return on investment are you getting for those particular items? Which one of those items that people are looking at? Is it the celebrity endorsement that's getting you the sale? Is it your ebook that you made? Maybe the webinar that you pushed out that people watched that then went to your site and bought. Like how are you making the money? Which is the initial lead for getting the money? And that is what you want to try to figure out, is which one of these efforts is worth it. And then this is just the last thing to just kind of reiterate again that when people look at a traditional sales funnel and they talk about it, these is kind of what they all brief, and it sounds good. Hey, first you have awareness, and then they consider, they evaluate your product, and then they purchase, and then you make money, and where they fit in any one of these, whether that made you the money or not. There's a nice, neat funnel. Well, depending on if you set these funnel pages up, or the reality is it probably looks more like this for the sales journey, where maybe they, despite the most funnel page layouts in a linear progression, the new sales journey can start with a peer referral on, social media. And then they go verify with other online comments, and then that leads them to an online search. to a competition comparison site, maybe, or maybe even your competition or you, and they kind of compare maybe a system that has third-party reviews. And then they eventually go to your site, and then they make a sales call off from that and contact you and buy something. So it's not necessarily a linear process anymore with the internet and digital stuff. And especially when you're doing all those different online marketing things, it probably looks more like this, where the path from a prospect to a customer is not a straight line. They're kind of back and forth and looking at different things along the, and it's not linear like we'd hope to see for just a sales page for a product. It doesn't look like that. It probably looks more like that. So the more it looks like that, the more complicated it could be to make a decision. Most of us, so it comes down to the analytics, and most of us probably use the Google Analytics, but and it works great for AdSense. But what about other traffic sources? What about these other systems? What ends up happening is everybody uses different analytics tools for their particular niche. That tells them other information. But unless you're using that same link structure in order to get the same data in multiple systems, whichever system you're paying to use, you're going to be seeing disparate data, things that don't line up. And what ends up happening is you make wrong assumptions or information based off from data that's maybe not accurate because you're only looking at, you're not looking at congruent data that's been, I guess, systematically, being tagged with the same information in order to make those kind of decisions. So the real goal is to have a tracking model that works with all marketing channels and all analytics tools. And that's why we come full circle back to the UTMs. And so bottom line is that UTM is simply an encoded back end of a link that you append to the URL. So it'd be www.yourdirectory.com / and then whatever that page is, it has some additional data appended to that URL. And it can be, pretty long and made up with a lot of different parameters, but each parameter basically provides specific information about the link in question. And then basically by stringing those parameters together, you can track your online campaigns with a tremendous amount of detail and granularity and go back and make decisions based off from those. So I just want to kind of show you what it looks like in an example, a demo one from my site. This is what it would look like on the side here with all the different strings attached to it. Instead of just saying directorytoolkit.com, you actually add all these different UTM parameters onto the link. And so just by them sharing that link or sharing that URL, you now have a bunch of rich information that you can parse through later and make concrete decisions for your business. So these UTMs have 6 different things just by default in there. That has the URL, and that's your main website. It has the campaign source, the campaign medium, the campaign name, the campaign content, and then the campaign term. And we're going to go through each one of these to kind of show you exactly what it does. So the first one is the UTM source. And so this basically tells you the traffic source. It's basically the referrer of the traffic to your page. So basically the website or platform or tool that you posted your link on. And so it's basically the traffic source sending the clicks to your directory. So if it was a link on Google, you'd put Google. If it was a referring website and you were giving somebody a link for an affiliate, it would have that affiliate website name on there. It's basically where are they coming from in order to do that. So obviously you can look at this button and make sense when you see a source. You can see whether all the links from Google were the ones that were paying off, or maybe it was Facebook or Instagram, etc. Maybe it was your SendFox newsletter. You can see the source that is basically making you all the money. So that's the traffic source, and that's the first one. And the second parameter is the type of link or traffic. So this is, in essence, is how the person got to the website in question or what medium the link was presented to them. So let's say you're spending money on a CPC cost per click campaign or email ad or something else like that, or you're focusing solely on Twitter, and so you're only doing tweets. It's the medium, basically how they click that. So not only do I know that I got the traffic maybe from Google, but I know that the CPC click off from Google as opposed to just a normal link is where I got that traffic from. So it's the medium, basically the type of traffic that you are getting. The third one is the goal or marketing focus, and this is basically the campaign. So this would generally refer to an overall marketing focus for that day, week, month, season, whatever have you. It's basically a nomenclature normally from traditional marketing in terms of campaigns. Like I'm doing a seasonal sale, so it's spring sale or summer sale. It's maybe a launch campaign, so I want to say launch, or maybe it's you label all your content marketing online just generically as content marketing, so you can kind of know that, hey, everything I'm doing online for social media posting is getting me the traffic. You can kind of break it down that way. Could be an event, a feature, product. You get the idea. But it basically groups everything under that one campaign. So when you're looking at it in the Google Analytics, it's basically grouped by that campaign, and you can kind of know and parse it down and go from there. So that is the campaign. The fourth one is a specific content. So this would be the type. If you're sending out multiple emails for that campaign, let's say it's the summer sale and you're sending out multiple emails, you can actually put what type of content or where that's coming from. So you could do content A and content B, or you could actually label the specific links inside of the email. So maybe it was a logo link or the buy now button. And so you can kind of start to tell that nobody is clicking on the text links inside the emails. Everybody is clicking the buy now button. So I'm going to focus on that, put text links in there. I'm going to focus and add more buttons just as an example. Or maybe there's an ad inside of a page campaign and everybody's clicking on the banner ad as opposed to the buy now button. So this basically gets you to specifically know which link on a page or in an email is actually providing the sale. And then the next one, the final general one, is the term or keyword. And so this is basically used for specific advertising campaigns, so namely the Google AdWords campaign. So when somebody clicks on an ad and this link is for a specific keyword, you now know that keyword was the one that made the sale. So maybe your spring sale did not do anything, but maybe the free trial keyword is what everybody was clicking on because they didn't care about the sale. They were clicking on the word free. So this just helps you to know which keyword to focus on for subsequent campaigns. And then some of them have actual custom ones where you can add your own. So it's kind of like a free for all. Maybe there's a combination of the other ones that will work better for you, or there's just something else a grouping that you would want to go look at later. And that some of these systems actually allow you to do customization on there. So just as a quick review, this is kind of what it looks like. It's a big long URL. But by having all these in here, I now know if I get a purchase from here, it was a Google email that was done on Google for my launch campaign, where I talked about webinars as my keyword, or webinar is how I pushed out that link to Google, and then I used the search term UTMs. So by putting all those in there, you can get the big long list in the URL. And so obviously when you have that long of a URL, a lot of times you don't want to actually show that big long URL. You want it to just show up. Obviously directorytoolkit.com is a lot cleaner and looks a lot nicer than that big long thing I gave you. So normally on these kind of services, when you have that set up, you want to shorten the URL so it looks a little bit more decent. And so I also recommend basically hiding that UTM data and making links neater. And this is a lot common one is bit.ly, where people can shorten the URLs. But there's a couple reasons why you want to do that. Obviously, the first one is links that use those UTM codes can look pretty messy. If you can shorten it back up to something shorter that looks nice, yet still retain all of the data that are in that UTM, that's what you want to do. The second thing is UTMs also reveal a lot of information about your marketing, right? It lets other people know exactly what keywords you're looking at, maybe what mediums you're focused on. Kind of reveals a lot about your marketing data. Maybe you don't want that open for all your competitors, so it keeps that a little bit secret as well. And then the third thing is, and is obviously a big one, is some customers also can be wary of those links that are long and complicated. So if they see a big long thing on there, they almost think that there's some sort of spam or some sort of thing embedded in there, or something that is something nefarious, something weird that they don't want to click on. So shortening it up can actually lead to increased conversion, leads, and clicks just because it doesn't look weird. And so over to the left there, you can kind of see some examples of the ones that I use for my domains. I always, this is a matter of fact, when I do a kind of a branding effort, I buy a shortened URL, and there's a new URL of the .link that is now available that I think works good for this purpose. So for example, for my directorytoolkit.com, if I add all these UTM parameters in there, I'm not going to add that big one in there. It's going to be dir.link and then / like A252 or something like that. It usually puts a hex, or I don't know what that would be called, a letter and number combination after the link, but keeps it fairly short. And then that's what you would post on social media or inside of your systems to give those links. And so I always recommend if you guys are going to use these parameters to be able to search for them later, get some sort of shortened URL. And then when we talk about the software, I think we're going to do that next week because there's a bunch of different variations on that. You'll be able to use those links as part of the software where you add those in there.
Does this only work with Google, or does it work with, or I mean, only with Chrome, or is it browser, not browser specific?
No, it's not. It's not a Chrome thing. It's a Google thing. So it's basically a standard that's used by other software. So, for example, if you use, I had Kissmetrics on there. So if you use that metric program or any other program, it's going to parse out or use that data because that's the I guess the internet standard. I would equate it to like browser requirements, right? Like every browser has rendering requirements. That doesn't matter if it's Firefox or Chrome. For the most part, there's standards, and they all look the same on different browsers because it's using the standard. And so these UTM parameters are an analytical standard that's was originated and founded by Google, but then kind of grabbed and used for any of those other analytic companies or softwares that you're using in order to get it. And then the other reason too is obviously it's done by Google. So if the most common one that everybody uses because it's free and has some great data is Google Analytics, and so that's what that uses. So even if you don't want to pay for anything else or don't have anything else that uses these, Google will use it at the very least, and it'll provide you with some data. So here's a couple different companies that we'll go over. Or here's the free one. Sorry, this is basically how. So the question is how do you get those UTMs set up without having to fat finger it in or figure it out right? So again, surprise, surprise, Google Analytics has a campaign URL builder. There's the website right there. You can just type in Google UTM. I think it'll come up. You basically provide the website URL, and you just hand type in all the source, medium, name, term, and content. And then it just makes that big long URL for you, so you don't have to actually do all the question marks and forward slashes and all that stuff. It'll just make it for you. So that's a free one that does it for you. But the thing about this one is, although it's free, you can't. It's easy to use. You don't get to archive any of that. You can't store them for later. So what ends up happening is sometimes you accidentally change the medium name, or you spell the term differently, or you can't use that later. You kind of have to have your own database or spreadsheet to go remember what you used in the past. And it's not very user friendly. It's kind of a one and done thing. So that there's actually other software that can help you out and add additional functionality. Like exchanging the images and some other stuff, which we'll talk about next week. But here's the 4 services that I'm going to touch base on next week, just real quick. And you guys can look these up or come with questions next week if you're actually curious about any of these. And I will have all 4 of these available at a discount off from their normal pricing for that you can get through directorytoolkit.com. But it's .url. UTM.io, Sharest, and then Switchy. And all of these are UTM creators, URL shorteners, and then pixel software, which I'll talk about next week as well. That'll also do remarketing pixels for different AdWords campaigns or other marketing stuff that you're doing as well. But these offer a myriad of benefits to those UTMs, allows you to store them, do additional content. And like I said, there's a lot of different features, which I won't go into now, but there's some programs that do that for you to make it easier. So it just becomes part of your automatic process. And one thing I'd like to say on these is it seems daunting, and it may seem like, no, I'm not really concerned about that, or like, who would actually look at this? The real value of this really becomes when you get to that point. Because if you start doing this stuff at the very beginning when you're posting to social media, and you do this over time, the over time stuff becomes where the eye-opening stuff comes in, because once you have all the data and you can look back, you can see trends over time. You can really see what maybe used to work that doesn't now, or you can maybe see consistency in conversions for particular media sources, etc., where it paid off in the past and it's paying off now. And I consistently see that is the way that, at least for my business model or my niche, that it's going to work for me. And you'll know that's the direction you want to go. If you just, if you just start it when you have a lot of, or making a lot of money, or you think you need it, then you don't have any historical data to even look at. And so I just reiterate, it's always better to do this kind of stuff early, even though you don't think you need it. Because once you start making money and you want to scale, and you want to add that stuff on there later, you need to have the data there, and it's only going to be there if you start using it earlier. So this is the last slide for today, just the bottom line. Just remember, it's all about efficiency for your company. If you don't know how much is there to improve upon, you don't know unless you check. And the only way you can check is if you have some data, and the only way you can get that data in today's economy is to add these UTM parameters in order to be able to parse it out. And so, you may be in the position where you're making enough money with what you're doing, and you don't care about this, and that's fine, right? Then you may just be fine being inefficient and making the money that you're making, and that's perfectly fine. But if you're not making enough money, right, or you may be forced to find where the leaks are in the boat. Because a lot of times with the small business, or you're doing it on the side, or you're not quite making as much money as you want, it could be just because you're wasting time, money, and effort on the wrong things. And if you would have focused on the things in that picture, the effort of what was actually paying off for you early on, you may actually scale a little bit faster, or make enough money to get a virtual assistant, to then that would scale you up even faster because you're focusing on the right things. And so it may force you to do that. And then if you're a larger corporation, or you get to a point where you have a couple employees or whatever, then at that point, it probably would behoove you to do this anyway as well, because now if you find any leaks, or you plug in those leaks, it's going to be well worth your time to pay somebody, or somebody on your team, to do that. Because the more money you're making, or the more money you're spending, the more plugging those gaps and leaks in the boat are gonna help you, because you're just that much. When you scale that much and you have that much throughput, plugging those gaps can really make you a lot of money, and obviously pay for any efforts that you're doing to try to figure out what's working for you guys. So it's up to you guys to discover and find that sweet spot for your company. You're probably in the somewhere in between the if you're on either, I would say you're under the bell curve, where you're making enough money, or you're not making enough money. You probably want to do it. If you're in the middle, maybe, and you're fine with where you're at, you don't want to spend to be a little bit more efficient, you're probably good. You probably don't need to do that at all. But just think about it for your company. If it's something where you want to get more efficient, you want to scale, you want to get bigger, at some point, you probably want to have this set up. And then if you're small enough where you're not making as much money as you want, maybe plugging the leaks and spending your time and money and effort on things that are going to pay off may be worth it for you to do.